my new Powermatic table saw. It's called a contractor saw. Basically, the only difference between this that I can tell and the smaller or lower end model cabinet saw is basically the stand. All the workings on the inside are pretty much the same. Same steel handles, same cast iron top, pretty much same fence. It's just in a cabinet and it's a little bit heavier, and I really didn't need that. But before I can finish or continue putting this together, I need to clean this oil up the top. So I'm going to give it a wipe down. They do this to protect it from rusting during shipment. So I'm going to take the bulk of it off. While it's kind of a mess, it's certainly appreciated. This thing is machined very nicely. The milling on the top is very nice. Looks really good. Nice and flat. I'll double check that in a minute, but I'm certain it's flat. Okay, now that I've got most of the oil off, I'm going to put a coat of paste wax on it. Just like all my other steel tables, I just use Johnson's paste wax. It works great. I do this depending on the situation, every 3 to 6 months. Just put a nice coat of paste wax down, wait a few minutes and buff it off. That'll protect it from the water and denatured alcohol, sweat drops. All right, we'll let that set a few minutes. And I'll repeat this process with the two cast iron wings that I'm going to install a little bit later. Pretty close to the next step, in fact, is putting the wings on. But before I do that, I want to decide this table, my workbench doubles as my off feed for my table saw. Billy, how can that happen? It's full of crap. Well, it's full of crap right now because I've got tools scattered from putting this together and stuff up here from other projects. I'll deal with that, get that all cleared off when I use the table saw to that end. With my old saw, these are what I had each leg sitting on. I had 6 legs because it was an extra long fit. This one is heavy enough it doesn't need the outboard leg because it's got cast iron wings instead of sheet metal, stamped steel. So it was sitting up here. This is 3 inches. Right now the top of this saw is 36 inches off the floor. The top of my workbench is 37.5 inches. This is 3. I need 1.5 inches. So I need to take these apart and mill these. I need to make this 1.5 inches. That's if I want this height to be the same as the workbench. Before I put these on, I'm going to put a blade on it, and I'm going to put the insert in, get it adjusted, put the riving knife on, get it all adjusted, and I will use my miter gauge and some clamps to cut this off. So that's what I'm doing this morning. We'll see where it goes from there. Okay, got the table nice and whacked. I have adjusted the clearance plate so that it's nice and flush all the way around. I have installed the blade and the riving knife. Got brand new blade, 50-tooth Irwin. When I'm doing really critical stuff that requires jointer quality cuts, then I install my forest woodworker too. The Irwin will do for most other things, and I'm going to use it to trim my blocks down when I get those ready. Okay, I've checked the blade using my combination square. I've got it set to this tooth, and then I rotate it back here and use the same tooth and check the distance. It's within, and the manual says it comes set from the factory, and it's really close. It's within a few thousandths of an inch, so it's not exact, but this isn't necessarily machine work. I can live with a few thousandths of an inch. It's relatively easy to adjust. There are 4 Allen head bolts that hold the table to the cabinet. Okay, again, I'm a little ahead of myself as far as the instruction manual goes, but I need to set this up so that I can use it, and I need to make sure my blade is square. Right now, this says I'm at 0 degrees, which is 90 degrees to the table. I've got my Wixie set to 0, put it on the blade. This should read 90. And it reads 90.3. So let's make a slight adjustment. Let's go to the other side of the saw. This is something I didn't realize. This is a left tilt saw. The saw I had was a right tilt saw. I actually prefer a left tilt. I got used to working with a right tilt, but I really like the left tilt. So let's take this back to 0. It is set to 0 from the factory. There's positive stops in here. Those are adjustable. All right, right now it's at 0.2 again. Let's 0 it to 0. Okay. Put this on the blade. And it's 90 degrees. The riving knife is in line with the blade, just like it should be. We're ready to go. I'm going to install the dust shroud now. Well, something I'm supposed to do later, but I want to be able to use my dust collection when I'm cutting. Let me get set up to cut. I'll come back. The miter gauge that came with this saw is actually pretty neat. You pull this detent out in order to move it because there's a positive stop at 0, and it pulls into a knob or a notch, and it is set at 0. So to loosen it, just like most others, you loosen the handle. However, you can't just move it. They don't move. What you have to do is pull this knob out, and there's saw teeth around here. You pull the knob out and turn to get the degree that you want, and it'll go up to 60 degrees either way. So this should be nearly as accurate as my Craig. And the miter gauge comes with this extruded aluminum fence, so you don't have to put a wooden one on here if you don't want to. You still could, sacrificial fence, but this one will take, looks like 1/4 bolts in the top, in the front. It's pretty cool. That will come in handy for making positive stops if you just need a short positive stop. Pretty cool fence for this miter gauge. All right, I'm gonna get these blocks cut. I'll come back. As you can see, I've got the saw on the blocks without the added 3/8 of an inch here. It's perfect height for my off feed. Not got as much done as I had hoped today, but I got some. At least I got everything situated and set up so that I can finish putting the saw together. So that's what I'm going to do next time I come out. Okay, now it's time to install the cast iron wings. I already took the plastic off of this, but you can see it's covered in oil. I will do the same thing with each wing. I'm going to wipe the oil down. When I get these all cleaned up and ready to go on, I'll come back. The instructions say to, when you mount these, to make sure that the bevel is at the front. And there's not a bevel at the back of the main table. And that's because it really isn't needed. What the bevel is for, when you've got the miter gauge off the saw, this bevel helps move the miter gauge up into position without you having to pick it up so much. It makes for a smoother transition. The instructions say make sure that the bevel is at the front, that way you don't flip these the wrong way. But they apparently changed something. They did it smart. Instead of making each extension and beveling one end, they actually beveled both. It keeps people from putting the extensions on wrong. Alright, I didn't actually record me putting this up here because it took several minutes and it was a pain for me wrestling with this thing. It ain't light. It's solid cast iron. So I finally got it stabbed. I'm going to get it relatively flush with my thumbs, and I'll snug these others up a little more. So without tightening these, I'm just going to snug them. With a rubber mallet, I can still move this around because I'm going to need to. It's going to have to go that way. And that's what the instruction manual tells you. Either use a dead blow or a rubber mallet. This is straight as anything I've got. Wow. That's awful close. And I mean awful close. That's good, folks, right there. I can't get it any better. So I'm going to tighten this middle one, make sure everything's still where it's supposed to be. It's nice and level here in the middle. Here on the outside, we'll tighten it up. Other than having my son help me lift this heavy thing up and get it on a stand, this was the hardest part of the installation, I guarantee you. I'll wipe everything down again. So before I do anything else, I'm going to re-wax the entire saw table. I'm going to repeat this process and then I'll wipe it down and I'll come back. Now, let's go to the manual and see what it says to do next. Okay, it says to put the rail system on next. Not quite as beefy as my Beastmeyer rail was. It's very solid nonetheless. This is good quality, thick wall tube steel. It says to install this, consult the manual that accompanies the fence. Now it's time to put the rail on. It's important to note here that it's slightly offset it does not need to run the full width over here. I'll put this one in the middle first just to hold it up. Place it just in a square. Check the height in several locations. It is touching. Let me check it one more time. Now the back rail. The height of the back rail is not critical. And the fence doesn't use it. It's mainly to keep everything lined up. Okay, the rails are on. Next thing on the list is the wood extension table. It's optional. I will probably install it at some point. I'm going to bypass that part of the instruction and go to the guide tube. This little jewel right here. So the guide tube sits like this. Now it says to measure from the tabletop down to the guide tube in several places to make sure that it's level or parallel to the top of the saw. It's within 1,000. Now we need to adjust it parallel to the miter slot. And it's awful close, but it's off just a little bit. So I've got to take it that way, which means I need to take this adjustment screw in just a little. When I get that all adjusted, I'll come back. Okay, I've got it adjusted. I mean, it's there. It is there. Okay, we made it square to the miter slot. Now it says squaring to the table. That looks square, and that looks square. Now time to install the scale. I'm going to wipe this down with denatured alcohol just to make sure that I don't have any oil on it, so the scale will stick well. We'll give that a few minutes to dry and I'll come back. After all the alignments for this fence and everything have been made, it says raise the blade all the way up, bring the fence so that it just touches the blade, center this scale between the screws, and it already is. Place a pencil mark on the guide tube at the cursor line. So I've got a pencil mark on the guide tube at the cursor. Peel away the back end, carefully apply the left end of the scale so that 0 aligns with your mark. Again, I'm probably going to be in the way here, but it's more important that I get this right. It's awful close. I might have missed it by a 64th. I wasn't really worried about it being a little off because it says measure the distance from the right side of the saw blade to the fence. So I'll do that by using this square, and this is 12 inches, so I'm good there. So I will make sure that cursor is on 12 inches, and then all my other cuts will be exact. And it was off just about a 64th of an inch. And now it's dead on. So, except for the optional extension table that I haven't installed yet, the saw is fully functional and together. Oops, one more thing. I have to mount the power switch to the rail. The reason that I thought I forgot something is because I was using the manual that came with the fence, remember? Now we have to go back to the main manual to finish setting everything up, some of which I've already done. Okay, we're good. I like that bump stop. Install the motor cover, the shroud, I've done that already. Install and removing the blade, I know how to do that. Driving knife is already installed. And it tells me about the blade guard and the knife and the driving knife for it. And it's over there in a box. It says if you use an extension cord, use a proper one, and it shows you gauge versus length. That's very, very important. I'm not using an extension cord per se, I'm using this power strip, and it is the appropriate gauge for this saw. It's a Veston, it's shop rated, and I really like it. Positive blade stop are next. Now let's talking about other adjustments. Fence alignment we've already done. So positive blade stop, I'm looking at 90, and the gauge is set well. I'm at 90, we tested that earlier. Let's check 45. And 45 is right there. the stop is set a little bit high. So if I want to run at 45 degrees rather than using the stops, I will use my whiskey gauge because I trust it. Now, unlike a lot of saws, this saw did not come with a Dado insert. I can buy one or I can make one. I will probably make one. Unlike the Delta that had a half-inch plate, so a half-inch piece of Corian fit in there perfectly, this one is 3/8. So I can take a piece of Corian, mill it down, and make my zero clearance and Dado inserts the same way that I made the other one. So I will probably make new inserts very soon. The one they show you is very similar to this bird's mouth piece. Yeah, it keeps your hand up and high, but what I don't like about these is sometimes what happens, the reason you get kicked back is because the back of the blade is coming in contact with the wood and pushing it forward. So it's important that when you're sawing, you keep positive pressure not only on the front, but at the back of the, or toward the back as best you can, of the piece you're cutting. And a push stick like this won't let you do that. The riving knife is supposed to help prevent kickbacks as well, because just like a splitter, like was on my old table saw, when you run the blade through, any stresses in the wood, and when you saw my kitchen island build, you saw that I actually showed you a board moving as it went through the saw. So that keeps the board from pinching on the blade, which helps prevent kickback. But you want to put as much pressure down up here as you can, which is why I like my gripper, because it lets me keep pressure up here. Or at the very least, a push stick like this keeps my hand well away from the blade, and this contacts the back of the piece. It doesn't need to be very big, and you can just run it through. And the nice thing about this, because you're pushing on it this way, look where the force is going. The force is going here into the table, keeping the piece away from it. Using a push stick like this, you don't have enough force down here, in my opinion. So we're done. Table saws together, it works. Not very loud at all. Very nice. Easy to reach stop switch. I'm going to be very happy with this. I will be putting the extension table in, or a router table, one of the two. I haven't decided yet. I had a router table in my old one. I let it go with the saw because I wasn't terribly happy with the table itself, so I'm looking for a better router table. So, my new saw, all set up and ready to go, which is a good thing because I have some chest of drawers to fix. I've got to make some runners for them. Yep.